of the process for this evening. I think we have 4 bills this evening. We have a Johnson bill that we're going to hear first, and then a Winkler bill, and then 2 Dabney bills. And we will, just as we did this morning, we'll allow 20 minutes for proponents and 20 minutes for opponents of those bills, and a little bit of time for members to ask questions. Remember, members and people in the audience, if you weren't here this morning, we're not voting on any of these bills tonight. They'll all be laid over for possible inclusion in a larger bill that we will deal with later in February. I wanted to say that we had I thought, a very respectful hearing this morning. I know we have people who have strong emotions about these issues, and our hope is that with your input and with the witnesses that will be testifying, that we'll be able to construct a bill that will be good for Minnesota. I would just ask again that members be respectful and that the audience be respectful of this process. When after the bills have all been heard, those 4 or 5 bills this evening, then we will open it up for public testimony, because your voice is important. And we have people in the overflow rooms, and we'll try to hear from hopefully all of you tonight if we can. And we would ask that you limit your comments to 3 minutes. And if somebody's already said something, it's probably not necessary to repeat it. But if you have something that you want to add, please do. And please keep your comments to the bill that you want to reference. We heard 2 bills today, one on background checks and one on mental health issues this morning. So if you want to address those 2 issues, just either use the House file name or when you want to talk about those particular bills. Also, unfortunately, the Ways and Means Committee is also scheduled for this hour, and so some of the members, including myself, are on the Ways and Means Committee and may have to check out of here if there is a vote that's needed, but we will just continue on. Please, members, especially turn off your cell phones, power off altogether so we don't have that buzzing noise. Okay, so with that, we will hear from Representative Johnson's bill first, House File 244. And Representative Johnson, I will move House File 244 for possible inclusion in the gun violence prevention bill. And welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Committee members, for the opportunity to present this bill this evening. House File 244. Members, this bill is directed at what we call straw purchases, where someone purchases a gun for another person who is either not allowed or unable to purchase it. An example would be a gang member with a criminal record who uses his girlfriend, who is the straw buyer without a criminal record, to buy guns for a gang. House File 244 makes it a gross misdemeanor to inform law enforcement that a firearm has been lost or stolen, knowing that the information is false. It becomes a felony if the person is convicted 2 or more times for this crime. The bill also makes it a felony to report a firearm lost or stolen while knowing or having reason to believe that the firearm was transferred to somebody who intends to use it for the furtherance of a felony crime of violence, such as aggravated robbery, 3rd or 4th degree assault, or crimes committed for the benefit of a gang or murder. And lastly, any person convicted of these crimes would be considered ineligible to possess a firearm. In current statutes, falsely reporting a crime is a misdemeanor. Members supporting this bill is the Minnesota Chiefs of Police Association, the Minnesota Police and Peace Officers Association. I've also spoken with the Ramsey County Attorney John Choi and the Hennepin County Attorney Mike Freeman, who are also in support of this bill, the prosecuting attorneys. And with me to testify today, I'm going to ask them to come down, are Dave Picha and Jim Franklin from the Minnesota Chiefs of Police Association, and they're going to come down and say a few words.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm Kay Peachin with Minnesota Chiefs of Police Association.
Welcome to the committee.
Thank you. Sir, members of the committee, the Minnesota Chiefs of Police Association supports House File 244. This provides Minnesota law enforcement a state-level gun trafficking law. When someone is unable to or is not allowed to purchase a gun, they often have acquaintances or girlfriends purchase the gun for them. This bill would make the purchaser guilty of a felony or a misdemeanor for making a straw purchase or for falsely reporting a gun lost or stolen. Anyone found guilty of this crime would be prohibited from owning a firearm. A typical excuse that a gun trafficker provides when confronted about a gun used in a crime that is traced back to them is that it was lost or stolen. We support House File 244 because it provides a remedy for this situation.
Thank you for your testimony. Mr. Franklin?
Mr. Chairman, members, Jim Franklin, Executive Director for Minnesota Sheriff's Association. Going third, I don't want to repeat everything that's already been said. I'll just echo our ditto that we appreciate the opportunity to support this bill. Secondly, I think it's the one thing that perhaps we as law enforcement complain about is not stiff enough penalties. We like this because it does stiffen it up. And I believe it's one of the things that many of our fellow permit holders and other gun advocates in the state feel strongly about, that support law enforcement. When somebody does something egregious, we should answer for that and hold them accountable, and we think that this does that. With that, I'll conclude.
Thank you, Mr. Franklin, for your testimony. Do you have any other witnesses, Representative Johnson?
Mr. Chair, I do not. That concludes our testimony at this
Are
point.
there any questions of the witnesses, members?
Well, I guess we do have one more
okay.
testifier. Sorry, Mr.
Please introduce yourself for the record, please.
Okay. Hi, my name is Heather Martens. I'm Executive Director of Protect Minnesota, working to end gun violence. And I'd like to bring up Pastor Gene Martin to sit with me. What we would like to talk about this evening, as we work with victims of gun violence, we'd like you to consider the effect that the presence of trafficked guns in our communities has on the safety of our communities, and how that affects the lives of individuals. And I think that Pastor Gene Martin is in a very good position to speak about this, as he himself is a victim of gun violence and is a minister in a community that is heavily impacted by gun violence and illegal gun trade.
Pastor Martin, welcome to the committee. Please introduce yourself for the record.
Okay, thank you. My name is Gene Martin, G-E-N-E-M-A-R-T-I-N. I pastor a church in North Minneapolis called Joint Heirs with Christ, Faith International. I started that church 14 years ago. And November 13th, 2006, at about 10:35 p.m., I received a phone call. I had just fallen asleep, and it was my oldest son, and he told me, he said, "Someone just killed my mom." I said, "What?" And then I didn't even want him to repeat that again. I said, okay. I got up and staggered out of the bed, put my clothes on, and of course went over to the house where she was, and someone had gone in there and put a shotgun or something to her, it looks like a shotgun, to her head, and just blew the side of her head off. And to this day, no one has been brought to justice for that crime. Also, I have three mothers in our congregation who have lost sons to gun violence, and I have a father also. He lost his son about 3 years ago to gun violence. And I was speaking just as we left this afternoon after we adjourned here, and I met with another of my members, and his brother had been killed by gun violence. So I'm just here to say that something really needs to be done. What we have is not working, it's broken, and I'm just thankful for the opportunity to come before you, and I'm very confident that some good will come out of this, good decisions will be made. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Anything further?
That's it.
Thank you. Any questions? Representative Cornish.
Now, what's the name of the testifier?
Gene Martin.
What, I'm very sorry for your loss, by the way, but the relevance to the current bill would be what? I mean, violence overall in general, or did it have a relevance to somebody buying a gun for somebody who said they haven't caught this person yet?
Pastor Martin.
They have not. I think what I'm saying is there, perhaps, I'm not sure if this is the most effective bill that I would need to be speaking to, but overall, I'm saying that gun violence has been a real nuisance to our community, and I'm here to testify that it is out of hand and that something should be done. So if this is the particular bill or not, or the best bill that my testimony fits, I'm not positive to that.
I can address that question also. I asked Pastor Martin.
Ms. Martin.
Oh, sorry, to speak. I asked him to speak because it is unknown what the source of that gun was. That is a serious problem in our communities. That's the case also with the killer of Terrell Mays, the 3-year-old who was walking up his stairs in his home when he was killed by a stray bullet. This is a serious problem in the community. We have trafficking of guns into that community, and we do know from the studies that we've cited earlier that straw purchases are a significant part of the gun trafficking problem that we face. And so I did ask Pastor Martin to come before you today to help to illustrate the effect of gun trafficking in our communities.
Mr. Chair?
Representative Cornish.
And once again, very sorry for the loss and for the tragedies that are occurring, but when we're talking about, affecting constitutional rights, we need facts related to the bills and, not just violence in general, but thank you very much for your testimony.
Any other questions? Then we will thank you, Ms. Martins, Pastor, for your testimony. Is there any opposition to House File 244? Mr. Olson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Johnson, I'm Professor Joe Olson, speaking today on behalf of the Gun Owners Civil Rights Alliance. It's difficult for me to be opposed to this since in 1992 or 1993, Howard Ornstein and I wrote 624.7141, which is in the bill. The issues that I see with the bill are the fact that if you look on line 1.24, it says knowing that the report is false. If you look down on line 2.4, it says knowing or have reason to believe. The problem is once again that in the law, knowing means actual knowledge, whereas reason to know or reason to believe or reason to anything means that you are negligent in not knowing. So that I think the language needs to be tightened the way the language was tightened in 1991 or 92 when Representative Ornstein and I were working on the bill. If it were tightened in that way, I don't believe I would have any objections to this bill.
Very good, Mr. Olson. Thank you for your testimony. Representative Johnson, maybe we can revisit that language. So, Representative Schoen.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Olson, I want to clarify with you. I mean, you say you don't think you would. Do you or don't you? If he changes that language, do you oppose it or do you not?
Mr. Olson, maybe you want to sit down and answer the question.
You know, the older I get, the more I learn over time. I have read the bill about 3 times. I haven't seen it in the context of the greater bill. What I'm saying is, at the moment, I don't have any objection if that change were made. When I sit down with the representative and we look over the changed language, I will be ready to commit myself when there is a complete bill. But I think it's a little too early to do that. I'm not objecting at all. I've indicated what I think it would be a good area to work on. And I suspect that I'm probably 90% likely to agree completely.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Did you want to testify in opposition to the bill, or
Yes, I would, Mr. Chairman.
please introduce yourself for the record?
Again, my name is Tim Bender. I am a deputy sheriff for Beltrami County. I am here not representing them. I am here representing myself. My concerns are more, I'm certainly not concerned with the criminals who will continue to lie and I just don't think that, it looks like this is going after the straw purchaser, and the person who's providing, as was said, boyfriends and others firearms. I'm concerned about how it would actually affect a responsible gun owner who's, in my experience, people are very concerned about who they sell to and labeling them as violent offenders, or, for making a mistake when a person that they've sold a pistol to or another firearm is used, as has already been said, it's already a felony to furnish a gun to a person if it's used in a crime of violence. Making a false report should be left where it is, which is a crime against the administration of justice. Otherwise, this would make a person who made a mistake the functional equivalent of a robber or a kidnapper, which are true crimes of violence. And unfortunately, I don't think I'm making my point as well as I'd like to.
Thank you, Mr. Bender. Oh, Representative Schoen.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Bender, and so what I want to clarify is that your concern is about someone that's making a mistake, correct?
Yeah, somebody who,
Mr. Bender,
yes.
we just need to go through the chair so we get this, it's all being taped, but I should have made that announcement. Go ahead and answer the question, please.
My concern, I do not feel sorry for the criminals who are doing buying and reselling guns, knowing what they're doing. It's the people that have maybe made an error.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Bender, so in your course of...
Representative, who was that? Representative Schoen?
Yep. Mr. Chair, Mr. Bender, so in your course of work, you and I go to work on a day-to-day basis as law enforcement officers. Someone does this on purpose, then you would support this language in this bill?
Mr. Bender.
I don't see any reason not to at this point. I do believe that people who do this on purpose, and it looks to me like the law already has a remedy for this, where it is already a crime with up to 10 years and a $20,000 penalty in jail for doing it.
Representative Kiefer, then Newberger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not sure who this question should go to. I just want a little clarification. As I understand this, the crime would be on the person that buys the firearm and then gives it to the person that can't buy it. Is that correct?
Representative Johnson.
Yeah, that's pretty much it, Representative.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Then I just have a quick follow-up. I mean, in
Senator
this
Kiefer.
committee, thank you, Mr. Chair. In this committee, we hear so much about making sure that the women who are under duress for some reason, they're involved in a gang or something, or they're being pimped or whatever, and we want to make them feel like they can come to law enforcement for help. Is this going to have an unintended consequence of maybe doing the opposite because they'll be forced to buy this firearm and then give it to these criminals, and maybe they wouldn't be able to go then to the police and say, you know, I'm in this situation, because then they'll be convicted of this crime? Thank you.
Representative Johnson, do you have a response to there? Ms. Martens, did you want to respond?
Yeah. Go ahead. This bill was written with that in mind, actually. The misdemeanor level charge is intended for the person who is under duress and making a straw purchase. What this provides is a remedy for that person at the misdemeanor level. It disqualifies them from buying a firearm again. So they cannot be forced again to purchase the firearm for a disqualified buyer. That was the intent in this case, and it was with that in mind. So yes, I think that it will go a long way toward helping the person under duress avoid being forced to do a criminal act again.
Representative Newberger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My comment, question builds on what Andrea was saying here, Representative Kiefer. I understand the need for this. My concern is what is to be done with vulnerable adults. We had last week a very excellent presentation on women who were being exploited in human trafficking. It affected me deeply. And I'm seeing here a recipe where, as Representative Kiefer was talking about, you have a woman who is being exploited, you have a woman who is being trafficked, and now she's being forced to buy firearms for her pimp or whoever it is that's owning her. First time she gets caught, it's a misdemeanor. Second time she gets caught, according to this law, would be a felony, correct?
She
Ms.
couldn't get
Martens,
caught a
Ms.
second.
Martens,
Oh, sorry.
you can go
She-
through the chair, please.
Sorry. Okay. She could not get caught again because she could not make another straw purchase. She would be a disqualified purchaser
Right.
after that misdemeanor.
Representative Newberger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So what you're saying then is you're taking a woman who's already been exploited, who's already been vulnerable, and you're taking away her Second Amendment right to purchase a firearm in the future to defend herself. I think if you're going to go through this bill, that these issues need to be addressed a little more thoroughly with the exploited women in mind, or exploited individuals, especially the vulnerable adults. Because I agree with Representative Kiefer on this issue, that this could possibly be used as a manipulation tool against those who are being exploited.
Ms. Martens, do you have anything else you want to add? Representative Schoen.
Mr. Chair and Representative Newberger, I think you know as well as I do in the court system that when somebody is a victim in one of these instances, they work pretty well together with the judges and the attorneys. And they have remedies in relation to these types of things. It happens all the time. It's called a plea bargain. And related, it's a misdemeanor. If someone's actually under duress, which these people are, then they would have a remedy for that. And that happens in the courts.
Representative Newberger, then we should probably move on.
But according to what we have written here, that they would forever be denied the right to purchase any firearms, correct?
Ms. Martens?
That's under the restrictions in Minnesota law, which have time limits depending on what the crime is.
Representative Cornish.
Mr. Chair, Ms. Martens, what has your research found how many times this occurred in 2012 and 2011, falsely reporting a crime of a missing firearm, misdemeanor type?
Ms. Martens?
Gun trafficking is something that we have no data on at all because the ATF is forbidden by Congress from providing us with that information. So we don't have any numbers. All we have is the vast experience of law enforcement who was up here testifying today saying we need a state-level law that allows us to prosecute gun trafficking without needing to necessarily rely on the staff of the ATF or other federal staff. We need this in order to go after gun trafficking in our state, and that's the reason why this is here.
And
Representative Cornish.
in other words, there's absolutely no data to back up that there's a problem. Thank you.
Okay, I think Ms. Martens answered the question. So any other questions? Thank you, Representative. Thank you all for testifying. Thank you, Representative Johnson. The chair will lay over House File 244. Next bill on the agenda is House File 184. Representative Winkler. Representative Winkler, welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, members, for hearing House File 184. Mr. Chair, this bill comes out of conversations I had not in 2013, 2012, but in 2011 in the fall with a constituent of mine who is sitting with me today and will share her story. And it arises out of the suicide of her daughter. And the substance of House File 184 is simply that if people who have mental illness are given an opportunity to guard their own safety through a state registry, and people are voluntarily able to put themselves on that registry and get themselves off, if they are permitted to voluntarily surrender firearms on a temporary basis and get them again, if we create tools for people to make it easier, by which we make it easier for them to protect their own safety and potentially the safety of others, we can go a good distance to protect against. My cell phone is not turned off, Mr. Chair.
No bill. No bill.
We need a cell phone ban. We can go a good distance towards preventing suicide, which claims 3 times more people in gun-related incidents in Minnesota than does homicide. And Mr. Chair, obviously this is a somewhat complex bill as drafted, and I would offer to anybody at the committee and anybody in the audience that if you have concerns about the way this operates, the way it functions, and ways to make it better, I'm very much open to that, and am simply trying to accomplish the broader goal of creating a voluntary registry. Finally, Mr. Chair, I did develop this bill in conjunction with NAMI. I've spoken with Representative Cornish about it. I've spoken with Jim Franklin of the Sheriff's Association about it. I have not heard directly a great deal of opposition to this bill, and I'm eager to hear tonight what changes people might suggest to improve it. So with that, I would turn it over to my constituent.
Hi, thank you for hearing me. My name is Diane Salgren. For a little over a year, my daughter was hospitalized 4 times with severe depression and on a suicide watch. The first time she went to the hospital by ambulance directly from her therapist's office. That first hospital stay, she was there approximately 4 weeks. Each of the other hospital stays were approximately 2 to 3 weeks. Each time, around May 5th, 2011, after her 3rd hospitalization, Angela purchased a gun. Shortly after she purchased a gun, she was hospitalized again for severe depression. She had been hospitalized 4 times. She had been on several medications and seen at least 2 doctors and several therapists outside of the hospital, besides the initial one that sent her to the hospital the first time. On July 5th, 2011, Angela checked into a motel, and sometime that evening, she put the gun in her mouth and ended her life. She was 31 years old and left behind 3 beautiful children. Since her death, I've been looking for answers. I found out that when she went to the police station to get her permit to purchase, because her name was similar to someone with a felony record, they did a complete background check, and none of the hospital visits, none of the doctor's visits, none of the suicide watches were on a list to prevent her from getting a gun. During any of those hospital stays or doctor's visits, had someone put her name on a list, Angela may be alive today. Is there a possibility she would have still taken her life? Yes, there's always a possibility of anything happening. But she didn't. She chose a gun. When someone is suffering from severe depression, their anger and delusion can spill out to others. There was every reason for friends and family all to be concerned about Angela with a gun. It seems common sense to me that while suffering from severe depression, an individual should be able to protect themselves from purchasing a gun. Angela bought the gun, but she really wasn't mentally stable enough to own one. Angela's purchase and others were at risk. Or Angela put herself and others at risk because there is no safety check for those mentally ill to purchase a gun. My oldest daughter suffers from non-epileptic seizures. When she had a seizure, her driver's license was suspended for a minimum of 3 months. If she stayed seizure-free for 3 months, and which showed that her medication level was at a good spot working, she was able to go see her doctor, get a form signed, send it into the DMV, and get her driver's license back. Why is a car considered so much more lethal than a gun? Please help me make this one senseless act, hundreds of senseless acts, or even thousands of senseless acts, mean something so that no parent, no child, no sibling has to hear their loved one is gone, whether the harm is self-inflicted or an act of someone that should not have access to a gun. There needs to be responsible precautions that would make less likely to happen again. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Representative Winkler.
And Mr. Chair, I think Ms. Aberholden has just a very brief comment as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Sue Aberholden with NAMI Minnesota. Several years ago, NAMI began carrying out an evidence-based practice for suicide prevention, and it's called Means Restriction Education. And the way it works is that we actually teach healthcare professionals and others how to teach families how to restrict access to lethal means. And we actually pass out lock boxes for medications and over-the-counter drugs and gun locks. One piece of this evidence-based practice is to also find out where you can voluntarily store your guns. If you want to take them out of your home because you're worried about a family or loved one. We actually in 2010 called 11 police departments in the metropolitan area, and 0 of them had any formal policy about how to bring guns in. Representative Mary Ellen Otrumba actually brought this issue up about 5 or 6 years ago as well in the rural areas when people want to get rid of them and they're not sure where to bring them. We actually think that there are people who would voluntarily put their names on this list. You know, not everyone owns a gun. I don't. And if I or one of my family members had serious depression, I might really encourage them to put them on the list because they don't hunt, they don't do anything like that, and that would actually protect them in the future. This is all voluntary. I think a mental health professional working with someone who had serious depression might say, you know, this might be a really good thing for you to do. And because it's voluntary, it's not releasing healthcare records or anything like that, that just makes it really clean. So we are supporting the legislation, and we think it could actually do a lot of good.
Questions for Mr. Aberholden?
Yeah.
Representative Johnson.
I just have a little bit of comment here. You had mentioned that you contact numerous law enforcement agencies in the metro area, and nobody has a policy for taking those firearms?
Ms. Aberholden.
Mr. Chairman, Representative, we contacted 11. 0 out of the 11 had a formal policy. 3 had an informal policy.
Okay.
Representative Johnson.
One of the reasons that they do not take the firearms is lack of space. I've worked in law enforcement for 27 years, and when the federal statutes changed on the domestic abuse requiring us, law enforcement, to take the firearms, there is no space. They do not have room for any more firearms. And as far as ammunition goes, that's classified as explosives, and it takes special places to put the ammunition, which there again, it doesn't have the space for that.
Ms. Abderholden?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, we did ask them also if they allowed officers to confiscate weapons from individuals who they thought were a danger to themselves or others, and all of them said that they did do that.
Representative
And store
Johnson?
them.
That is correct, but that was a law enforcement issue, not a voluntary type deal.
Okay. Representative Cornish?
Well, Mr. Chair, members, just a few concerns that I have, naturally, and we'll probably hear the sheriffs testify, but it seems like a kind of an unfunded mandate here, Representative Paymar. It also seems problematic, somebody call up and say, I'm having mental problems, I'm on my way to the sheriff's office with a load of guns. Other than that, and then we're also creating a list, and there's no rules written right now in Chapter 13 of data privacy, I think, that establish a list like that or rules to get rid of it once it's created. We'd probably have to write something to force the sheriff's department to get rid of the list once they created it. Because right now there's no authority to create the list or get rid of it, and there is laws like that written for other type of law enforcement data that's assembled. And then this bill would depend on other bills and how they're written. We've got some of the bills that give the sheriff, in the earlier bills we heard, authority to go back to where it used to be on a whim, and whether he or she could take this under consideration person on this list in factoring under his consideration whether to issue a permit. So that's some of my concerns on this bill here.
Representative Winkler, you want to respond to that?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Cornish, I do think that there is a question of how law enforcement handles this requirement. I have spoken with Mr. Franklin about that very issue, and there may be some alternatives to just handing them over to the local sheriff and requiring them to hold them and store them and take care of them. We'll see. The storage issue is one issue. As for data, I mean, if this bill were to travel together or separately, it would obviously have to go through various other committee stops where some of the data practices issues could be addressed, as well as any potential financial consequences. So all those things could be addressed in due course in the committee process. And I don't know what the pleasure of the chair is as far as moving bills individually or all together, but I would think that we could all work it out in a way that would be reasonable, as long as people weren't objecting to it in concept.
Representative Uglum?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just like to piggyback on that. Being a former mayor, this does, cities every day are presented with lots of unfunded mandates that the legislature, bills that will pass and everything else, and then cities end up picking up the tab. We should not underestimate the cost that this could become for cities. Representative Johnson mentioned the fact, obviously, storing ammunition and everything else, explosion-proof rooms, obviously inventory, and just the space. I know of no local police department in my general area that has the ability to do that. And I think from a fiscal note standpoint or from a appropriation standpoint, that if this bill did happen to pass, there has to be something in it for the cities to provide this storage, and I'm very dubious about that.
Representative Winkler?
Mr. Chair, Representative Uglum, I guess I would just say that we also have the opportunity to create a local impact note, if that is something that's desired, in which we study the costs at the local level, not just to the state, and we could certainly either accommodate those costs or adjust the bill to reduce them. So that's clearly part of the process if we move this bill forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And Representative Schoen, you had a question.
Mr. Chair, I think it's important to point out that, someone on their way to the police department with guns and is suicidal, that's what we do for a living. We respond to those things. And to intervene in those particular circumstances, call it an unfunded mandate if you will, but that's what we do. Right now, we get reports from the judges that we have to confiscate firearms from individuals that are ordered to turn them over as related to a DANCO, which is a domestic abuse no contact order, or related to their order or their conditions of release. My question to you, Mr. Representative Winkler, is when you look at this, and one of the things that first popped out to me, would it be okay if on this bill you looked at, say, You're an intermediary. This is a temporary holding, isn't it? Is that the part? Because what I've envisioned, would you be able to reach out to other family members? Because this is kind of a crisis response, not maybe necessarily looking at it as a long-term storage issue?
Representative Winkler.
Mr. Chair, Representative Schoen, that it could be crisis, but it's more likely not to be. It's more likely to be people who are thinking ahead and trying to protect themselves and looking at the availability of firearms in homes in which they live or other family members and so on. So it could have a longer-term impact. And, you know, there's always the option of surrendering it or selling it, obviously, and it may be that we offer people an opportunity to change this from temporary storage to a permanent disposition of the firearm if they so choose. I guess, you know, I frankly have more experience with guns than I have with mental illness, and I know that for a lot of people, my family included, guns are family heirlooms, and people aren't ready to make long-term decisions necessarily, even though they have a short-term immediate problem, and so this would help get over that hurdle.
If there's no other question, do we have anyone in the audience who's opposed to this bill that would like to testify? Mr. Olson.
Professor Joseph Olson again. Remember, you heard it here first. I don't really object to this bill. I think it has a lot of problems because you're mixing up voluntary action by the patient. I heard at least the witness talk about voluntary action by other people in the family. You have data practices problems. This should probably be private data and not made public. You have a process that's entirely open to the commissioner with no limitations whatsoever. There should probably be time limitations, and there should certainly be due process considerations. And I would be happy to work with the representative with regard to this bill. If people want to do things voluntarily, they should be able to do things voluntarily. But this is a very complex bill that doesn't seem to fit together well yet.
Thank you, Professor Olson. And, that's a good point. A lot of these bills are works in progress, and I hope we can make them better as we move along. Representative Newberger.
Is there any provision in this bill? Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is there any provision in this bill to have your name removed from this list once you are on it? Is there a destruction date like there is on other lists? What's the status of that? Or if you request to have your name removed, how does that work?
Representative Winkler.
Mr. Chair, Representative Newberger, I have to confess that I don't know the exact mechanism by which your name could be removed, but there is a provision in here for doing so, and that's a very important point. This is voluntary in getting on the list, and with some proper process, it is voluntary to remove yourself from the list subsequently as well. This is not intended as a trap for people to surrender any rights that they may have. It is intended to create a tool for people to police their own safety.
Representative Newberger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Would there be any notification that if your name was shared with other agencies, either state or federal? I think that would be important to know. How far, we've been dealing a lot with data practices here, especially in civil law. Where does the list stop, and who would have access to that? Those parameters need to be, clarified.
Representative Winkler.
Mr. Chair and Representative Newberger, I agree. I do think the correct place to address that issue beyond any public safety issues that would be raised would be in the Civil Law Committee. And certainly, I am very open to any privacy concerns that people may have about this. And I believe the advocates concerned about mental health would be equally concerned about that privacy. We do not want to create barriers or reasons for people not to seek treatment. And so we certainly have to be very careful about the data.
Sir, did you want to testify against this bill? Yes, please. Okay, please. Again, members, if you could turn off your cell phones, power them off totally, that would really help. Okay. Please.
Thomas Bowling, retired U.S. Army, live in Coon Rapids. I see a potential for some serious abuse of this bill. Spouses oftentimes have different feelings about a lot of things, and weapons in particular. And I can see where spouses, family members could have these weapons put into storage out of animosity or just for a variety of reasons. And I think that should be considered in the final outcome.
Was it Doling or Bowling?
Bowling.
Bowling.
B-O-L-I-N-G.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Bowling, for your testimony.
You're welcome.
Seeing no other questions, Representative Winkler, the chair will lay over House File 184.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members.
Representative Dabney. While we're waiting for Representative Dabney, again, we're going to, as soon as his two bills are heard, we will open this up for public testimony on the two bills that we heard this morning or any of these bills that we heard this afternoon. If you're here to talk about the bills that we're hearing tomorrow, the assault weapons ban and the high-capacity magazine issue, we prefer that you wait until tomorrow or Thursday evening to address that issue. Just, we want to focus on these bills tonight. And I don't see Representative Dabney. So I think what, wasn't he here? I thought I saw him here too, but I'm cognizant of people's time here, and I think what we'll do is and another announcement for the people in the overflow rooms. If you want to testify, please sign up on the sheets, and we will call you in before the evening is over. It would be nice if we could finish up by 10 o'clock so people could get home. And Representative Dabney, welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, everyone.
Are you, which bill are we, let's see, this is House File 238. Or do you want to do the other one?
Well, we can do both at the same time.
Very
They're connected in terms of approach, concept, and impact.
Dabney, the chair will move House File 238 and 239 for possible inclusion in the gun violence prevention bill, and it's the intent to lay these bills over.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, my intent with both of these bills is to ask a simple question. Are we equal before the law? If two individuals engage in the same behavior that is in state statute identified as a crime, should they be treated similarly in the court system? Are we equal before the law? House File 238 establishes equal penalties for offenders who unlawfully possess a weapon on school property. I believe, counsel can correct me, but I believe it also applies to daycare settings.
Mr. Diebel or Mr. Clary? Can you clarify the, what was this, which provision are you looking at in your bill, Representative Dabney?
Mr. Chair, I'm just confirming that it also applies to daycare settings.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, members, the definition in the statute 609.66 of school property does include child care centers licensed under Chapter 245A.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Diebel. I wanted to do that just to, well, the title of the bill may be confusing to people. So I want to assure members of the committee and the audience that all current conditions and exceptions for permit holders continue to apply. If you're a police officer or active duty military, this does not apply. If you're a permit holder with a weapon in the back of your car or the trunk of a motor vehicle, does not apply. If you're bringing a weapon onto school property for a firearm safety or marksmanship course, does not apply. Other procedural issues, or excuse me, other conditions and exceptions that are currently in statute. And of course, if you have the permission of either the principal or the individual in control of the school building or of the daycare, that does not apply. What it does do is establish equal penalties between a permit holder who carries onto school property without conforming to the exceptions and a non-permit holder who carries that same weapon onto the same property without the permission of school authorities. So again, are we equal before the law? House File 239, again, is, as I stated at the beginning of my presentation, is similar in concept and impact. Again, are we equal when two individuals bring a weapon into a private establishment that has conformed with all the laws on signage and the like, is asked to leave and refuses to do so? Again, it maintains all the current procedures that are currently in law. Proper notice must be posted by the person who owns or controls the private property. The requester, as it's termed in law, must personally inform the person that guns are prohibited on the premises. It applies narrowly only to private property, but not to parking areas of private property, and landlords may not prohibit the possession of weapons in apartments that they rent out to others and the like. It does not apply, again, to active licensed police or to security guards in the course and scope of their employment. I should mention, Mr. Chair, that on House File 238, the one that applies to schools, Education Minnesota is in support of this bill. I think that's particularly of notice because, of course, they run the risk of some of their members illegally carrying onto school property, and were this bill to become law, ending up with a higher set of legal consequences than they would currently face.
Very good. Do you have anyone to testify on the bill?
I do not.
Is there any questions? Representative Cornish.
Representative Davney, I think I finally have found areas of agreement with you. And
Can we stop there, Mr. Chair?
When we bring this bill,
Representative Cornish.
Mr. Chair, Representative Davney, when bring this bill up again in 2 weeks for amendment, I think that we could work together on amendment on the school one that we agree. And what I would do, it would be offer an amendment to do away with all penalties and allow the teachers and staff to become armed, and then send them a letter of commendation for caring about the safety of our children and sacrificing their time and effort. On the other one, on the other bill, I would do away with the penalty on the posting of businesses, and under a new sign, I would say, "You are now entering a killing zone. Run, run, run." So that would be my...
Okay.
That would be my amendment.
Representative Cornish.
Thank you.
Members, we had sort of an agreement this morning, Representative Cornish, it was all...
And I didn't ask for that.
No, you did not ask for the applause, but if we'll get through the evening a lot easier and a lot more respectful if we can hold our applause and proceed. So, Representative Davney, are there any other questions? Representative Newberger.
Burn through this microphone. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Davney, you said that this bill does not apply to people who already have permits to carry. As I went through this bill, where in the bill does it say that? Because I see here on 2.9, persons authorized to carry a pistol under section 624.714 while in a motor vehicle or outside of a motor vehicle to directly from the place a firearm in or to retrieve from the trunk or the rear area of that vehicle. I'm getting a little bit of a mixed message. What you were saying is that this bill does not apply to people who currently have their permit to carry. And it's my understanding that if I have my permit to carry, that all I need to do is get permission from my school superintendent if I'm a law-abiding citizen, and I can carry that weapon on school grounds. Now, this means I got more to say, but could you please show me in the bill where that applies, where a permit to carry is permitted lawfully in the school with the permission of the superintendent?
Representative Dabney.
Mr. Chair, Representative Newberger, I did not say that it did not apply to people with permits to carry. You may have misunderstood me, and I apologize if I was not clear. If you, as I stated, all the current procedures still apply. But, Representative Newberg, if you walk into a school today and you have not received the proper permission, under current state law, you're violating the law. If I walk in, I do not have a permit with a weapon, I'm violating the law. We are both violating the law. We are both engaged in the same behavior. I'm arguing through this bill that we both then should be treated similarly.
One more question, Mr. Chair. Thank you. One more thing I'd like to have clarification on is 2.19.
Of which bill, Representative Newberger?
This would be 238. I'm sorry, it's 2.7. You're talking about the limitations here. The area within a school bus, when that bus is being used by a school to transport one or more elementary, middle, or secondary school students to and from school-related activities, including curricular, co-curricular, non-curricular, extracurricular, and supplementary activities. You want to define that area for me? If there is a school activity going on in a park, and my house is next to that park, and I have my, I'm cleaning my shotgun in my backyard, am I within the area of that school bus? What is the area definition of 2.7?
Representative Newberger, that's all current law, but Representative Dabney, if you'd like to elaborate, you may.
Mr. Chair, Representative Newberger, thank you. As the Chair indicated, that's current law. I'm not proposing any changes to that, so I would ask Council, House Research staff to answer the questions. I did not, I'm not proposing any changes in this law.
Yes.
Mr. Clary.
And Representative Newberg, it's the area within a school bus that's talked about in Area 2.7, not the area around the school bus.
Thank you. Thank you for that clarification.
Representative Uglum.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Question, I guess, we talk about equality under the law and everything. I think under this bill, we're assuming that every gun that shows up in a parking lot or whatever on the way to school, someone has an intent to shoot up the school or whatever. And I have to tell you a little story about a school teacher that I know that I just talked to, as a matter of fact, last week, up in northern Minnesota, a lot of snow. So instead of going to school and taking her car, she took her husband's car, or her husband's truck, shall I say. And in the back of that truck was his muzzle loader from deer hunting. She took it, drove to school, parked in the parking lot, didn't realize it until she came out, looked in the back seat after school, and she got out of there as fast as she could because, under this bill, she would be a felon. And then I also wonder sometimes if we don't forget about some of our country kids, our kids that are out on the farms and everything else. And I know that many of my friends and things used to go to school in the morning and they'd leave early and they'd go pheasant hunting. And they'd have a shotgun in the back of their car or whatever, and they'd be legitimately hunting on the way to school. And maybe those days are going to be gone. I don't know. But I hate to see that good farm kids and kids out in the country would no longer be able to do that, because there are kids that do that. And now they will be felons. So I'm concerned about that. I'm concerned about one size fits all here. I really am. And I would like to see, we have to look at some of these exceptions here. We can't assume that just every gun that comes by way of school is going to kill somebody, because it isn't the case.
Thank you, Representative Uglum. Representative Lesh, unless you wanted to respond. I'm sorry, Representative Dabney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Uglum, if you read the bill, the two scenarios you just described of an adult bringing a gun to the school parking lot or a student bringing a gun to the school parking lot are legal under current law. If House File 238 were to become law, they would be legal under that law. I propose no changes And I spoke to that when I presented the bills, specifically no change to permit holders with weapon in the back or trunk of the motor vehicle. So that's current law, and I propose no change to that.
Mr. Chair?
Representative Uglum.
That's the point. This woman isn't a permit holder. Okay? The woman is not a permit holder. She's just an ordinary substitute teacher, not a permit holder.
Mr. Chair?
Representative Dabney.
Then, again, Representative Uglum, if she violated current law, I make no change in that.
I think we understand. Representative Lesh.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, Representative Uglum, you highlight, I think, one of the major issues with what happened when we forced a statewide standard down the throats of everyone in every part of the state. We used to have two systems, whereby it wouldn't be as much of an issue for those kids, those farm kids. No one pheasant hunts in my neighborhood, and if they do, they're in the wrong place, up in St. Paul. The fact is, we used to be able to do that. Now, because of certain individuals' insistence upon a statewide standard, we run into these problems where your kids in your district are forced to live to the same statewide standard as kids in urban Twin Cities. So I just think it highlights a great example of why we have a problem with this in the first place.
Okay, seeing no other questions, those in opposition to either of the Dabney bills, we have, why don't you come up, sir, and then also there's a Kara Schultz. If you could please introduce yourself for the record.
Hi, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name's Eric Bekezer. I am a professional security consultant. I've been working in the security and law enforcement business for 25 years. I am also currently the Director of Public Safety for a higher education institution here in Minnesota. And I have experience working in both schools and private facilities as well as government facilities doing law enforcement and security work. My experience in 25 years doing this type of work regarding people who have permits to carry, I've done this both in Nebraska and here in Minnesota, both before the 2003 law and after the 2003 permit to carry law. And I cannot recall a single instance where we've had an issue with a permit holder entering a facility unlawfully or refusing to leave when asked. It's simply never been a problem. I did some research on this, and in all of my research, and I checked with other colleagues, I could not find a single case where an individual that entered a private business that was posted and refused to leave and been criminally charged. Even though the law allows for a criminal charge, it's a trespassing ticket. None of those, in 10 years since 2003, I could not find a single instance anywhere in the state of Minnesota with over 200,000 permits to carry issued where someone had received one of those tickets for violating the law. I feel like we're trying to make a criminal where there is none. We're looking for criminals where there aren't any. People who carry guns, for those of us that carry firearms, it's as natural as carrying your wallet. It's very easy to be walking along and all of a sudden go, oh, I'm not supposed to go in this area. And what we're doing here is we're just creating minefields, particularly with the private establishments, where we cannot, we were in the risk of becoming criminals in a very short amount of time, charged criminally for something that anybody else is allowed to do. Permit holders are overwhelmingly law-abiding. Statistically, they're more law-abiding than the general public. They're more law-abiding than police officers and many other demographics, and I don't see how this solves any problems.
Thank you for your testimony. Ms. Schultz, did you want to, I had you up here, and then we'll take the gentleman right behind you.
Hi, I'm Kara Schultz, and I'm a board member with the Libertarian Party of Minnesota. I am also a mother and a veteran, and I am the proud mother of a serving member of our military at this moment. But I will be giving the official position of the Libertarian Party on this particular bill, which is, well, proposed bill, which is 238. In the aftermath of the recent tragedy in the Connecticut school, legislators in our state are gearing up to do something. The Libertarian Party of Minnesota is proposing a solution that will bolster school safety while defending the ability of responsible individuals to bear arms. By a 7-0 vote, the LPN Executive Committee unanimously passed a resolution calling for our state legislators to repeal prohibition on self-defense by teachers or other adults on school grounds, and to resist misguided legislation that further erodes freedom, and to stand up for the right of all peaceful, responsible adults to defend themselves. We believe that violence is best addressed by expanding liberty, not further restricting it. The freedom of self-defense is a fundamental human right. Schools will remain vulnerable to future acts of mass violence until this right is restored to teachers and other responsible adults. So we encourage the Minnesota legislature to exercise their 10th Amendment ability to opt out of the Gun-Free School Zones Act of 1990, which prohibits adults on school grounds from defending themselves and the children entrusted to their care. So this misguided law has created a helpless victim zone, which have become very appealing targets for people with violent intentions. We also support the rights of adult students to be able to defend themselves while on college and university grounds. We disagree with the NRA's proposal, which would mandate armed police officers in every school and a new government program to fund them. Turning schools into a police state is not desirable or necessary, nor is creating a new program for this. Instead of increasing the penalty for law-abiding conceal or carry permit holders from a misdemeanor to a felony in 238, the law should be amended in subdivision E8 to say, possession of dangerous weapons, BB guns, or replica firearms is permissible with notification of the principal or other persons having general control and supervision of the school or a director of a child care center, which is similar to the laws for carrying a weapon in this very room. Allowing teachers to bear arms, even if only one or two may choose to do so at each school, would increase the likelihood of a quick response to violence before it can escalate to a mass tragedy, but mainly it would serve as a deterrent. But we also think certain stipulations should apply. Teachers who carry should be certified by an organization which conducts training in firearms and safety and marksmanship. Procedures should also be put in place for a safekeeping of firearms while on school grounds so the weapons are kept away from children. We also call on the media to exercise better judgment when reporting acts of mass violence. Saturation news coverage has rewarded attackers with levels of fame on par with presidents, astronauts, and our athletes. Other individuals seeing mass murder as an instant path to celebrity might now be encouraged to do similar acts. So while we support the freedom of the press, and we realize that the public definitely deserves to be kept informed, journalists must recognize the effect that they have upon the public and dramatically reduce the sensationalism of horrific crimes. Now, unfortunately, no solution can totally eradicate violence. While mass murders are incredibly rare, criminally minded individuals will always be willing to harm others. And that's the same now as it's been throughout history. But restoring and reaffirming the Second Amendment right to self-defense allows citizens to protect themselves if the need ever arises, giving the innocent a fighting chance. Because self-defense isn't just a constitutionally guaranteed freedom, it's a basic human right that every human being deserves. And that is our official statement on 238.
Thank you, Ms. Schultz, for your testimony. Sir?
Good evening. Mr. Chair, I'm Rob Dorr. I'm a permit to carry instructor with Blue Line Defense, also a father of a 3-year-old in daycare and a 5-year-old in kindergarten. So,
Welcome to the committee.
As a permit to carry holder, I've got a little bit of a vested interest in this, as well as many of my students do. One thing that makes a permit to carry holder fundamentally different than an average member of the public is that they go throughout their day carrying a firearm. As one of my colleagues just mentioned, that it becomes just like carrying your wallet. You check your wallet, check your phone, got your gun, you're ready to go. It is that natural of an occurrence. What this bill is doing is not providing an equal prosecution. It's providing an enhanced prosecution against permit holders, because up till the point where they walk until that school border, they are legally carrying. Somebody who is not a permit holder, who is carrying a gun up into that school point is already breaking the law. So we charge them with a felony because it's the zone is that much more serious of an offense. To somebody who is completely law-abiding up until that border, we afford them the benefit of the doubt that maybe something have happened. And I've got a personal story that speaks to that. As I mentioned, I've got a 3-year-old. There is not a slide that we walk past that he will not run to. He loves slides. It just so happened this fall, while I was carrying, we were walking near on a sidewalk, a public sidewalk near a school that's by where we live. He saw the slide and he bolted right for that slide. Despite my best verbal efforts, was not able to retrieve him. Now, at that time, I was carrying. So had I walked onto the property of the school, had I been confronted by police, I would have been committing a misdemeanor. My firearm wouldn't have been subject to forfeiture. If this bill becomes law, not only will I now be an instant felon for merely trying to retrieve my son off of school property, my firearm is also subject to confiscation. And I think that we are trying to make criminals where there are none. The law should exist to protect honest citizens and not try to make criminals out of them with laws that really have no base and no reason for coming into effect.
Thank you, Mr. Dorr, for your testimony. Mr. Olson, did you want to also speak to this bill?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I did.
Welcome back to the committee, Professor.
Thank you very much.
Mark.
In 2003, it was my pleasure to work with Representative Linda Boudreau in assisting her in putting together the concealed carry reform bill that passed in Minnesota. And I was involved in the negotiations over both of these sections. The language that you see before you is negotiated language that was negotiated between representatives of the school districts and the other school associations on one hand, and representatives of the Minnesota business community on the other. Prior to 2003, a permit holder could carry anywhere in a school at any time without telling anyone, simply because he had a permit. The 2003 statute narrowed significantly the rights that a permit holder had with respect to carrying in school. And one of the things was that you could no longer carry in the school. But we recognized that, and the people who were representing the education establishment in Minnesota recognized that permit holders are people who have had training, who have had background checks, who are not likely to be intent on committing a crime in the school, and that for them it was appropriate, given the changes that were being made and the substantial reductions in their ability to carry firearms in school areas, to treat them as misdemeanors and to make their firearms not subject to forfeiture. So that was part of an overall deal made at the time. Now, I understand later legislatures are not bound by that, but I have been here for 25 years, and normally that is a strong consideration. The same thing happened with respect to subdivision 17, the posting provision. We had long and involved negotiations between Representative Boudreau, myself, and others with the Minnesota business community. We had the Minnesota Business Partnership, we had the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce, and we had the Small Business Association. They all agreed with this provision. That is, that the permit holder who was in a restaurant or place of business had gotten there because he had missed the sign. Even though we have large, easy-to-view signs in our statute, not every business puts them up. Sometimes they open doors or they put ferns in such a location that you can't see the sign. And the theory was that the permit holder, being there essentially by accident, when reminded, would get up and leave. And we made it a petty misdemeanor so that if you had a permit holder who was somewhat reluctant to leave, you had an offense that you could call the police to escort him out. To the best of my knowledge, this has never happened anywhere in Minnesota in the 10 years that this law has been in effect. So the compromise worked. It's working today. There is a reason for it, because we're dealing with people who have significantly more training and familiarity with the safe handling of firearms than the general person who would be in a school or in a restaurant. So there are reasons for these provisions. They were negotiated into the 2003 Act, and I think those reasons remain true today. Thank you.
Mr. Olson, you want to wait for 1 minute, and Representative Dabney, do you want to respond to any of the last few comments, or to Mr. Olson?
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Chair. In December, a permit holder did walk into a Minneapolis school with a loaded weapon. I think the committee should consider the significant disruption to education that occurred that day through the school day, when the school remained on a yellow lockdown, or yellow level of lockdown, with students kept in their classrooms, escorted by staff, and such alike, and through the after-school activities that were scheduled to occur that day as well. So a permit holder, I think we can, well, maybe we can't agree that that was a significant lapse in judgment on their part. I can assure you that the staff did not feel safer that day because someone brought a loaded weapon into the school building. So I do hope the committee will consider that. As to, speaks to House File 238. To House File 239, Mr. Chair, I was always taught a couple of things growing up. One, my rights end where your nose begins. And while I respect and understand the rights of permit carriers, I was also taught that the best way to earn respect is to show respect. And if a private business chooses to post for whatever their rationale is, I would hope that as part of a civil society, we would all agree to respect the wishes of that business. The only way that a permit carrier gets into trouble is when they walk past the sign, perhaps obstructed, perhaps there's a fern there, and then after being directed to leave by a staff member of that private business, they refuse. They are given notice by sign and then given notice again verbally, and they refuse to comply and respect that private business's decision. And as I said, Mr. Chair, I think my rights end where your nose begins, and if you're running a private business and do not wish me to be there with my weapon and my permit, then I should honor and respect that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Olson, thank you for your testimony. Any other questions? Representative Cornish.
Just a quick comment, Mr. Chair and members. I agree with Representative Dabney that caused quite a bit of disruption in the school when that person walked in with that firearm, the permit holder. But the problem is that's the way we've trained people now with this culture that we've got into, that you have to be embarrassed or illegal to carry a weapon. Now, I carry a .40 caliber Glock with me every day here at work, and if more of us carried it open, sooner or later it would be like Arizona, a lot of other states. Somebody would see you with a weapon on your hip, hey, no big deal. And that's the way it would be in K-12 if we allowed carry. Sooner or later people would get used to it, then it wouldn't be a big alarm anymore. When I was in Arizona walking a number of business places, a person with a big .45 in their hip, nobody thought a thing of it, just self-defense. That's the way their culture is. But with this, we've made guns scary for some reason in this state, and I think that's one of the problems that came about at that school. As soon as you found somebody with a gun, it's like somebody wrote me a letter the other day and said, a security guard left a revolver in a school. What do you think about that? And then they said, well, I said, what happened? They said, well, it was secured and turned in, nobody got hurt. The same with this other instance here. So, I mean, things are going to happen, but as evidence. They rarely, if ever, or never do, and so we can, if, but I just wish our culture was different, so people were more comfortable with firearms. As long as we keep it like this, they never will be, so. Just a comment.
Representative Newberger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Dabney, did you speak to the school staff about this this incident? Did you have any conversations or any type of interaction with them after this happened?
Representative Dabney.
Mr. Chair, Representative Newberger, yes, I did.
Okay. Seeing no more questions. Oh, Representative Newberger, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, just had a follow-up. So you had statements, you spoke to them, and they communicated to you specifically that they did not feel safe because there was someone there with a firearm?
Representative Dabney.
Mr. Chair, Representative Newberger, that's correct. And while police were called, the weapon was discovered early in the day. Police were called. The staff member was escorted from the building. Because they were a permit holder, of course, they were facing very little in the way of legal consequences for violating the law. The school remained on yellow lockdown or the yellow status because they didn't know the motivation of the individual. And they were concerned that she might return, or he or she might return with a different weapon. And given that they did not know the motivation, they thought that was prudent rationale then to take extraordinary cause of restricting student movement throughout the day, restricting access to the building, so on, and as I indicated earlier, beyond the school day through the after-school activities of the day.
Representative Newberger. Are you done?
No more questions.
Okay, Representative Dabney. Did I already lay these bills over? Well, I'll lay them over again. Representative, the chair will lay over House File 238, 239. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you for the evening, Mr. Chair.
I would like to invite from the other rooms, Mr. Chad Nelson, Jim Schultze, and Linda Stanton. They are the only people that have asked to, as far as I know, to testify on any of the bills that have been heard today. Those are the only three people that we know that from the other rooms that would like to testify. But we'll start with okay, so what we'll do now is we're going to hear from people in this room in addition to the three people that I just identified. They can testify on any of the bills. Please try to limit your comments to House File 237, the background checks, Representative Schoen's bill on mental health screening, Representative Winkler's bill on voluntary registry, Representative Johnson's on gun trafficking, and the two Dabney bills. I realize there's additional emotions that go into the whole issue, but we'll try to limit your comments to those bills. The other bills will be held at will be heard at a different day. So the first person is Alan Lifson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, committee members. My name is Alan Lifson. I'm a physician. I'm a professor of epidemiology and community health at the University of Minnesota. Now, through my work through the past 30 years on AIDS and other public health problems, including at the Minnesota Department of Health, including at the Centers Disease for Control, I've seen how policies guided by evidence as to what works can turn around an epidemic, preventing disability and death. And in reference to 237, the universal background check, I've been asked to briefly review what is the current research on background checks and their public health impact for this committee. So my first surprise when I reviewed this was how the gun industry lobby has really blocked research on the issue of gun safety. For many years, appropriations to NIH and to CDC, which funds most academic research, specifically prohibited use of funds that might promote gun regulations. Congressional amendments prohibit ATF from releasing firearm data to researchers and require destruction of gun purchase records within 24 hours, making them unavailable for study. Despite these barriers, a number of studies have been done, and I'll do my best to summarize for you in the next 2 minutes what I've learned and concluded, and I also have available for the committee a more detailed information sheet about these studies than time allows me to cover this evening. First, the current gun laws do have serious holes in them. A 2000 study by ATF of guns used in crimes, including guns used by felons and used by juveniles, found that the largest number of firearms, over 38%, were traced to purchase either at gun shows or through unlicensed sellers where background checks were not required. A similar investigation found that felons commonly buying and selling guns at gun shows also reported that 1/3 of investigations involved over 50 firearms and 1/10 over 250 firearms. These were not one friend selling a family gun to another friend. These were weapons trafficking networks. Research also reports that gun shows are implicated in scenarios where a straw purchaser buys and hands over guns to juveniles or a felon in exchange for money or drugs, and the lack of documentation from these unregulated purchases makes the gun impossible to trace. Second, although the current law needs strengthening, in a number of studies, restrictions have shown benefits. 2 studies found that those with violent misdemeanor convictions or prior felony arrests who were denied handguns were less likely to have subsequent arrests for violent or gun-related crimes. And another study of those who were denied handguns because of domestic violence restraining orders found as soon as the restraining order expired, the demands for guns by these individuals significantly increased. In terms of gun trafficking to criminals, studies report that in states with strong gun purchasing and registration laws, the percentage of guns with in-state origins that were implicated in crimes was less than half that compared to states with weak regulations. Third, multiple national opinion polls show this is what the American people want. In one study, 89% of all respondents, 84% of gun owners, and 74% of NRA members agreed with requiring background checks on all gun sales. Well, finally, public health is not just about statistics, it's about people and it's about names. And in addition to the stories that you've heard this morning and this evening, the story of Ricky Birdsong, a father who was shot in front of his young children, Juan Junyan, a graduate student who was shot on his way to church by the same person who was denied a gun after a background check, who then purchased a weapon from a seller who sold multiple guns without background checks, which were used in a shooting spree against African Americans, against Asians, and against Jews. So in conclusion, as a public health physician and as a proud citizen of Minnesota, I believe that both the scientific evidence and these human stories compel us to implement policies such as universal background checks to make our citizens as safe and healthy as possible. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony, Mr. Lipson. I don't see any questions, so thank you. The next testifier is Daryl Young. Welcome to the committee.
Oh, thank you, thank you. Good evening, everybody. My name is Daryl Young, and also I'm here as a Northside resident. Been a Northside resident for the last 30-plus years. I'm a father of one baby girl, and also I'm a family advocate for Emerge Community Development, and also I am a youth violence prevention executive committee member. So the reason why I'm up here is just to testify about how this caused an effect for me with my family. I have my niece here, and basically I brought her here because I wanted to witness what this bill could really do for the future of our community. July 25th, 2006, I got a phone call at midnight. Shots were fired, and I thought it was just a joke. I just went outside, and a half a block away from my house was my brother. He was 17 years old. He's dead in the middle of the street. My brother was not gang affiliated. He's not a gang member, none of that. So with that, I found him in the street. The first thing went to my mind was retaliation, but I didn't do that. So the next step for me was to walk into my mother's room, which I brought them from Chicago to bring them from violence, and to wake her out of her sleep at 12:30 in the morning to tell her that her baby is dead. And so with that, it really tore my family apart. I dropped out of school. I stopped doing things in the community that will help lift my community. I was angry. So with people like my niece back here and other young people I work with in my church, Shiloh Timber National Ministries in North Minneapolis, I couldn't stop. And I had to be the voice for them. And so with this bill, it will really, for me, it will really tear apart the future, the next generation. I feel that with this, I'm at a point now where I don't want to have no more kids because the effects that will have on her or my next generation. So I'm really, really here not just for her or my daughter, but for the next generation. And I would like to see that there will be, stronger gun laws. And gun violence has really affected my community. And I'm, at this point, tired of doing funerals. I have done at least 30 funerals in the last 5 years of people who are 18 and under. And I'm just tired of it. I don't know how many people that affects back behind me, but standing in front of you, it affected me and 1,000 more. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Young, for your testimony. See any questions here? The next testifier is Joan Peterson. Is Ms. Peterson here? Oh, she is.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee,
Welcome to the committee.
thank you. My name is Joan Peterson. I have been working on this issue since 1992, since my sister, Barbara Lund, was shot to death by her estranged husband. This is an issue that's very passionate, very important to me and to all of the other victims that I think are sitting behind me, people that I represent who aren't here today. I represent the majority of Americans who are telling us the time is now. After the Sandy Hook Elementary School shootings, everything changed in this country. If we can't do something now about common sense gun legislation to stop the shootings, to stop the funerals that the gentleman who was just before you talked about, then when can we do it? Enough is enough. 90% of Americans are telling us in poll after poll after poll that they want universal background checks. When is the last time you have seen 90% of Americans polled on an issue in favor of one thing? They are telling you to do something. They are telling you doing nothing is not an option. There are too many victims. There are too many shootings. There are too many funerals. There are too many families like mine devastated. It's been 20 years since my sister was shot to death. I haven't forgotten. My family hasn't forgotten. We remember her often. It's a hole that we all have learned to live around. It is not a pleasant thing. We don't want others to have to go through what we have gone through. So I don't see how passing common sense gun restrictions and common sense gun measures that we are talking about here today can hurt anybody. It seems to me that we are going to make our communities safer. We are going to stop the devastation, or at least we're going to try. I think we have to try. We are not trying hard enough. If more guns made us safer, why do we have more gun deaths per capita than any other democratized country in the world? More guns have not made us safer in this country, and I urge you to please consider passing common sense gun legislation. This is a no-brainer to most of the public. So please do this for the sake of the victims. Please stand for what's right. Please stand for common sense, and please stand for the victims. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your testimony, Ms. Peterson. Ms. Martens, did you want to testify, or do you have
Yes.
someone else that?
I would
Okay.
like to testify. I do have someone I'd like to bring up.
Okay, and then we'll, okay, sure. Who is, please, identify yourself for the record, please.
Yeah, thank you, members, and Mr. Chair. My name is Leroy Duncan. I am a St. Paul resident, a father of very young children who attend public school here in St. Paul. I'm also a soon-to-be board member with a group called From Death to Life. It's a group here in Minneapolis, and also a organizer with Protect Minnesota. And I really want to address specifically House File 237 and Representative Dabney's bills, House File 238 and 239. So I think my first real concern here as a parent is the idea that any advocate in this state has the right to put guns in public schools, period. I as a father and as a community member and as a citizen of Minnesota, I feel like I have the right to make sure that my kids aren't surrounded by guns. You know, I think there's research that shows nationally that actually guns in homes more often result in accidental shootings and suicides and homicides of family members. And that data is overwhelming, 22 to 43 times more likely. So what that says to me as a father is I absolutely do not trust people I don't know with firearms, with deadly force around my own children. And I believe I have that right as a citizen of St. Paul and Minnesota. And then the other thing I wanted to address was also House File 237. So I consider myself a victim of gun violence. My brother was charged and convicted of murder when I was 13 years old. My brother was 17 at the time. He was not even graduated high school at the time. He, you know, was a brilliant, bright kid. He was my hero. He was my older brother. He was the person that I looked up to. And he and a group of 4 suburban kids here in Minnesota decided that it would be a good idea to rob a store. And what they did was they got a gun, a pistol, a bunch of teenagers. They got in a car and they went to rob a store. And my brother happened to be the person who went inside the store that day while the other 4 kids hung out outside the store driving the car. And on that day, my brother pulled that trigger, and he became just one of millions of young black men who are incarcerated in this nation. And I lost my hero that day. And the reality is what we're facing as a nation is a crisis. 30,000 lives a year. And each of these lives represent heroes. These are people that drive buses. These are people that have families. These are people who are looked up to, like my brother. And I think that we, you know, I enjoy, you know, I think it's good that we're all here talking about this, but there's no way we can take this lightly. I think we really need to consider what the message we are sending to young kids all across the state, right? We have an opportunity to act as a state and send a message to these young kids to say that, you know what, these rights come with responsibilities. They're deadly weapons that can change people's lives and their existences forever, not only through the taking of that life, but also through incarceration, right? So, you know, I come into this not only from, you know, working with countless victims through Protect Minnesota, you know, to take numerous different measures, not only you know, policy-wise, but actual, you know, community engagement, you know, initiatives that are just about educating the public. But I come to this, you know, I come into this really from a perspective of understanding that there are many victims in gun crime as well. So I think that's an aspect of this that we should not forget about, and if we did, we would be missing some critical things. And I just have a little data to show, because I also...
Mr. Duncan, quickly, I'm trying to limit to about 3 minutes because there's a lot of people that want to speak here.
Absolutely, and I'm very sorry. I just wanted to show this, because I come to this, before you as also a young African-American man. So, and I think this is important. So in each year, from 2006 to 2010, homicide was the leading cause of death for African-Americans in this nation, for African-American men. That's 4 years straight that in my community, the leading cause of death was gun violence and homicide, right? And then that's not to talk about the massive effect that suicides have. So I just think it's important that we consider the views of many different constituencies and look at this problem on a wide scale. And then, thank you.
Thank you for your testimony, Mr. Duncan. Ms. Martens, did you want to testify
Yeah,
again?
I'd like to speak to the, to 237 on something that was raised about gun registration.
Okay.
I think it's important to understand how gun sales occur at a federally licensed dealer today. This is something that all gun buyers go through currently if they go to a gun store like Gander Mountain. What you do is you go up to the counter, give your name, and the dealer calls the FBI center in West Virginia where the records are checked to see if this person has a felony. That checking is done. It takes about 3 minutes on average. And what happens is that transaction is assigned a number, which is retained only by the federally licensed dealer. The number is retained by the dealer and the FBI. The FBI is required by law to destroy the record of the background check within 24 hours. This is why a background check is not the same as gun registration, and I think that's an important thing to point out. So if the gun is traced to a crime, what occurs is the FBI needs to call the dealer and find out who purchased that gun originally. And one of the problems that we face in those situations is that if the original buyer has sold the gun to someone else, we have no idea who that was. We have no way of tracing any kind of number. And I think that the real-life effect of that is we do not know who killed Terrell Mays, the 3-year-old who died in Minneapolis. And 40% of murders in the United States are unsolved. Those, having someone taken from you in a violent way is incredibly devastating. To have someone taken from you and to have no justice, you have no idea who did that, that is even more devastating. And I think I would like to close with the thought that we have many rights in our society, and one of those rights is to live safely in your own community, to drop off your kids at school and feel that they are safe, and to not be faced with the thought every hour of the day that someone is going to come after you with a gun. I don't think that we should have to live that way, and I don't think that we should. I think it is telling that our country has a 20 times higher homicide rate than other industrialized countries, gun homicide rate, than other industrialized countries. I don't think we should have to put up with that. And the only way that we're going to address that is to get serious about keeping guns out of the hands of criminals and to distinguish and to recognize that the use of a gun in self-defense is extremely rare. It is far outnumbered by homicides and suicides and accidental deaths. In Minnesota, we have about 350 gun deaths on average each year. 3/4 of those are suicides. I think it's important to bear in mind that a gun does not make you safer in your home. And I think that that should also be borne in mind while we consider how to keep guns out of the hands of criminals. So I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Martens. Okay, I guess we have two lines here. I don't know how this started, but I guess we'll just alternate. How about that? So, sir, why don't you introduce yourself, and then we'll take my right side.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I'm Andrew Rothman, representing the Gun Owners Civil Rights Alliance. I think that we need to be honest when we look at these numbers. The first thing is that Ms. Martens talked about 30,000 gun deaths a year, but we're talking about 8,500 murders. The rest are suicides. And while suicide is truly horrible, there's no evidence that suicidal people will not make a substitution for another means of suicide. In Minnesota, we had 91 murders last year. In 2011. The 2012 numbers aren't out yet from the BCA. 91 murders. That's less than half of the murders that we had in 1995. The number of guns in this country is hugely larger. The number of guns in this state is hugely larger. Minneapolis has 7% of the population of Minnesota. Minneapolis had 41% of the murders in 2011. We don't have a gun problem. We have a gang problem. We have a criminal problem. 80%, studies have found, 80% of those who are murdered are themselves criminals, serious criminals. The vast majority of murders in this country are criminals killing each other. The gentleman who spoke before spoke of his brother, the perpetrator, as another victim of gun violence. I don't understand that. I really don't. And while I have sympathy for this poor gentleman who lost his hero, that was the result of his brother's poor choices. That was not a result of me or of Joe or of any of these other hundreds of gun owners who came out here today. We're not here to take the blame for the actions of criminals. Let the criminals take the blame for the actions of criminals. And why don't you guys focus on those criminals and not the law-abiding? When we speak of these unlicensed transfers, when we talk about these unregulated transfers, is there any member of this committee that thinks that a gang member or a drug dealer or a murderer is going to go down to the gun store and submit to one of these background checks? Are they going to break one more law? All you will be doing is putting an additional impediment in front of all these folks who are not breaking any laws anyway.
Thank you for your testimony, Mr. Rothman. Let's take the gentleman over here on the right.
Hello.
Welcome to the committee. If you could please state your name for the record.
My name is Chad Nelson. I'd like to thank the panel and the system for allowing me to make a short little statement. My name is Chad Nelson, and I am a disabled veteran. Please don't make me choose between my civil rights that I serve to protect and getting the help that I need. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Nelson, for your testimony. We'll take the gentleman from the middle. Please introduce yourself for the record. Welcome to the committee.
My name is Stephen Peterson. I've held a federal firearms license since 1975. I've taught hunter safety training on behalf of the state of Minnesota for at least 10 years. I have a concealed carry permit that I've held for 2 years. And I've lived in Minnesota since 1974, and I am acutely aware of the rules and the regulations that we have in place and the crime problem that exists here. I think our conversation nationally and at the state level is misdirected because we do not have a short-term solution. It is a long-term solution in spite of the fact the nation is crying for a short-term solution. Okay. House File 237, as I read it, appears to me to be a step into the zone of government registration at the state level of gun owners and registration of their particular firearms via the universal background check. Currently, the government does not know who owns firearms, and I would submit that most of the people here in this room and most of the citizens do not want a central registration of who owns firearms or of what type. Now, On January 20th, and most of you may be already aware of this article, and I think it's wholly instructive, there's an individual that killed his mother that had over a dozen weapons and was using some type of altered identification to get his permit to purchase. The bigger point out of this article is that although that is a problem, in my opinion, the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, from what is reported here to have 168,000 suspense files, has been apparently unable to process these to determine whether or not these individuals are prohibited from owning firearms. I would suggest to the committee that this is an issue of access on a national level and a state level. People say, well, what's your solution? I have one solution, and it's a partial solution. We need to make probation officers personally responsible for each and every individual to see that all of their criminal records are uploaded into the BCA database as soon as practical after that individual is assigned to them. The problem that we have now is that we've had attempted control through the court systems and law enforcement agencies, and we need to fix it at one place. I think the solution is that simple. They have a checkoff list, they make the call to the BCA, they do a teletype in or whatever they do to make sure that those records are on hand. I called the BCA 3 weeks ago to get an explanation as to why these 168,000 files were not sent back to the originating authorities, and I have yet to receive a response on it. So when people talk about existing enforcing laws, that's exactly what needs to happen, and we have a major failure right here. So that's my partial solution to the problem.
Mr. Peterson, I just want to say I share your concern about that, and I've asked staff here to start drafting some language because I don't know if we're going to be able to resolve it this legislative session, but I want to construct a working group to find out why that data is not getting to the BCA and why we don't, law enforcement and the courts cannot communicate effectively. So I just wanted to say that I hope we can address that, and that's not lost on the committee.
Well, I will add also, I sent an 11-point letter to a one-page letter to Vice President Biden on the 26th of December, addressing strictly mental health issues and the control of those, so that we don't have to get into ineffective, needless further regulation that's going to impede law-abiding gun owners. I have yet to hear back from the Vice President. So some of my requests are falling on deaf ears. That's why I'm here tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson, for your testimony. We have someone on the right side here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Derek Teedy. And I guess I'm coming from maybe a different...
Can you just say your name again? I'm sorry, we didn't get it for the record.
Derek Teedy, T-H-I-E-D-E.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
I'm coming from a little ways up north, and I think I do have a different perspective than some of the people that have testified today. I know full well that each and every one of you have constituents who are hunters. My uncle, he moved back to Minnesota from California. He enjoys the pace of life that Minnesota has. He enjoys the hunting and the fishing. He's since deceased, but one of the things that he ran into when he came back is he was getting older, and my body doesn't work as well as it used to. He exchanged his bolt action 30-06, which almost everyone here has seen. Most of you have probably even used. It's the sort of the standard for Minnesota hunters. He traded it in for one of these military-style assault weapons. It's a Remington 7400. It's a high-capacity firearm that's semi-automatic. What he did that for was not because he was aggressive. He did it because it's got a lower recoil. He wanted to continue doing something he loved here in Minnesota, and so he did that by legally purchasing one of these weapons. So I want to speak against restricting the ability of gun owners to own whatever gun they choose. We're responsible. He did it because of his health, not because of any aggression or anything like that. I encourage you to stand opposed or to withdraw your support from bills that would restrict our access to firearms.
Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
And the members of the public, if you could try to keep your comments to the bills at hand, I'd appreciate that, but I understand he came a long way away and probably can't be here for tomorrow's hearing. So, which side was I on? Go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman. My name is Hamilton Earhart from Rochester, Minnesota. I am an honorably discharged Army reservist, and currently I carry I'm a concealed carry holder, as is my wife. I take particular issue with 238 and 239, increasing the penalties against carrying firearms, especially 238 on the school property. This fallacy of banning guns in schools needs to stop. I mean, the staff in the schools, the children in the schools are just as deserving of immediate and swift retaliation against an attacker in their school as is anybody on the street. That's what we should be looking at, is how to expand the rights and responsibilities of good law-abiding concealed carry holders. They are by far the lowest crime committing people in the public. As far as gun violence overall, if you look at the actual FBI statistics, in the last 20 years, homicides and violent crime have dropped 50%. 50%. It was going down before the last assault weapon ban. It continued to go down after the sunset of that ban. So people talk about there's an epidemic of violence, but it's still going down. And I think a key part of that is people can defend themselves lawfully with a concealed carry weapon in their homes, in their cars, when they're out at restaurants and shopping. But why do we insist that the schools are going to ban this? They continue to block access to firearms so that the teachers, the staff, can defend the students until the police can get there. It's like having a fire extinguisher. Why do you have a fire extinguisher? To put out the fire while it's small, instead of waiting till the fire department gets there and it's already engulfed the entire room. Why are we telling them that they cannot defend themselves immediately to that threat, and instead waiting 20 minutes until the police get there and it's already blown out of control? We need to end this gun-free zone fallacy now.
Thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Earhart, for your testimony. Someone from the right side, please.
My name is Jim Schultz. Mr. Chairman, honorable legislators, I come before you today to ask for your support to oppose any further erosion of the Second Amendment right of citizens to keep and bear arms. I feel bad anytime anyone is harmed by gun violence. I wish all guns would be taken away from madmen, evildoers, criminals, and bad guys. However, this will not be achieved by taking away guns from responsible citizens. As I am not a criminal and my gun is not being used for illegal purposes, how will further restricting my ability to enjoy my firearm make the world safer? Do you feel that you need to punish me for what has happened elsewhere? Would you like me to go to jail for the little girl in Minneapolis who was paralyzed by a stray gang bullet? We need to focus your perspective on finding and fixing criminals. You cannot fix criminals by restricting responsible citizens even more. Taking my gun, whatever style it is, or however many bullets it holds, will not stop the criminal gangs from shooting it out in your neighborhood tonight. I have great respect for law enforcement in this country, but they have limitations. They cannot be everywhere all of the time. To expect them to be everywhere all of the time is unreasonable. Citizens must accept some responsibility for themselves and their actions. Guns in the hands of responsible citizens is a terrific thing. In fact, citizens that have conceal and carry permits are the safest people in our nation. I'm very disappointed in the atmosphere that your trampling of the Bill of Rights is causing. Responsible citizens of Minnesota have no reason to be pitted against the responsible citizens of Minnesota who happen to choose to own a firearm. What all citizens have to be concerned about are the criminals doing illegal acts, and I request your support in focusing on solving that problem. Some specific concerns are HF 237. There is a gun concern registration that seems to be kind of backdooring this. Miss Martins probably hasn't bought a gun lately, as she proclaims she doesn't own one. After the 3-minute background check she described, the gun serial number that was written down on the form at the time the check was called in is stored for 30 years or until BATFI comes and picks up those records. So you're registered. 1.12 on 237. While claiming to be concerned about safety, why do you address only pistols and military-style assault weapons? That seems to be the hot words lately. I guess you figure the shotguns and rifles can't hurt you like the previously mentioned can. 2.3 and 2.4. As far as I can tell, you're eliminating due process. Imagine a sheriff puts me in jail because he says I'm acting crazy. An hour later, he says I've calmed down, chats with me, and I seem to be normal, and he lets me out. An hour later, he can legally come to my door and confiscate my gun. 5.6, why more photos? The DMV, thereby the police and sheriffs, and the passport folks already have my photos. 8.27 through 9.27. Wow, this is hugely infringent. Complete records of who and which and firearms registration, that thing is just full of pitfalls. On 915, if I read it correctly, even if nothing is transferred, full federal records must be filed. So if you go there and you're doing everything legally and you decide to cancel the deal, all the records go fully into the federal record bank or wherever. 1112 and 1113. Who here has a crystal ball and can see the future? What if I sell 2 guns to someone who appears to be a legitimate buyer? He then goes out, commits a crime. Just before he's caught, he passes off his second gun to a criminal accomplice who goes out and commits another crime and gets caught. Now, the law enforcement apprehends that criminal, and now I'm a felon because I didn't have a crystal ball to know that those guys were going to go out and commit those crimes.
Mr. Schultz, can you please wrap up your comments?
HF 244, sir. Ms. Martin says that we will make a criminal out of the unwilling girlfriend to help her so she won't have to buy any more guns. And if the unwitting girlfriend does not get a plea bargain, she gets a year in jail, I think, if you're reading 3.31. Following on HF 244, 2.5 and 5.19, again, a crystal ball appears to be required to see the intention forever. HF 240, 1.15 and repeated throughout. You're now guilty until proven innocent by a primary care physician. What happened to a jury of my peers? Any police contacts in your lifetime?
Mr. Schultz, you're going to have to wrap up. I've asked for a 3-minute limit, and you've gone to six minutes now, and I'm trying to, we have one
HF
accommodate.
184, 3.28, what's the cost and liability of the taxpayers for that? 5.4, are shotguns and rifles considered to be a problem, or just the hot-button weapons at this time? And I'll wrap up, sir. Speaking as a Minnesota voter and citizen, I expect you to make clear-minded response, if any. Do not make an emotional response, just using a lame excuse of saying, we have to do something. And please try not to trample on my right of keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you for your testimony, Mr. Schultz. Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, my name's Dan Gustafson. I'm an uncle, a brother, a son, a small business owner. I'm a member of my small town's Public Safety Commission. I, too, am a victim of gun violence. Because of the actions of some irresponsible criminal, my inalienable rights are now being threatened. So please, remember your oath to the Constitution and follow it. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony, Mr. Gustafson. Sir? Welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Douglas Voigt. I'm a citizen of St. Cloud. I will warn you, I may touch on some of the bills that you've asked to wait till tomorrow. I apologize for this. I do work for a living, and that requires being at work.
Go ahead.
237, the gun registration. I have a problem with this. First of all, firearms registration is the first step to harassment by the government. I do not need the government telling me how to store my firearms, telling me that it's okay for me to have a firearm, or judging whether I need that firearm. You're also getting very close to infringing on the Fourth and Fifth Amendments, due process and illegal search and seizure. To continue with 248, the bill about carrying in schools, I'll say that I'm a 2007 graduate of Rocori High School. If any of you have forgotten, in 2003, Rocori High School had a shooting. 2 students were killed. I do not blame guns for this tragedy. What I blame is a school system where the administrators will not make decisions. Zero tolerance is the word of the land. If a child who's being bullied punches his bullier, he's treated like he's just killed that person. Excuse me. As you can see, this is an emotional subject.
That's okay.
But again, why are we blaming guns, inanimate objects, for the misdeeds of people? Why are gun owners being thrown into the prisons to say, as a response to the tragedies and the misdoings of people? And now, furthermore, to touch on 241, if gun control worked in communist China, where no civilians are allowed to have firearms whatsoever, 22 children would not have been killed the same day that Sandy Hook happened. Gun control does not stop violence. It may reduce gun violence by reducing the availability of firearms, but it does not stop violence. Violence can only be stopped with the immediate and swift response of overwhelming force by good, law-abiding citizens. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony, Mr. Voigt. Sir?
I thank the committee for taking my testimony. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The name is Greg Royce, and I'm from Roseville, Minnesota. Small business owner, convert to being Minnesotan. I'm originally from California, and as most of you may or may not know, California has very stringent gun control. Similar in stature, I would, as a Californian and convert to Minnesota, would say. The state of Minnesota has, as you all have heard, various requirements, including the permit to purchase, going through a federal NICS check and what have you. The state of California has laws that are stringent as well. As we've heard from a lot of other people, and there's studies and testimony and opinions and studies and testimony. People cite laws and they cite studies. Yet when they say the word study, they never refer to any study specifically. Earlier we had this morning, I believe our psychologist who she testified with regard to data in the New England Journal of Medicine. She testified with regard to medical studies that had come out and specifically cited studies. So as it's been said, I hope that most members of the committee will remember that if someone says study, but they don't hold back on if they mention a study, but they don't come forward with the specifics on the location of where that study was cited. We hear this term that 40% of guns are purchased outside of checks and regulation via the gun show loophole, yet no one has specifically cited any study that they get that number from. I find that very curious. With regard to HF 237, specifically 529, the statement, if deemed necessary, is included, allowing the discretion of police chiefs or sheriffs, if deemed necessary, to require fingerprinting of an applicant. As many have said before, this is a status of registration, if deemed necessary, would be definitely trusting our appointed sheriffs, our elected sheriffs, as well as our police chiefs, and their discretion is good. But I'd like to see some sort of a test regarding what would deem necessary for fingerprinting a citizen applying for a purchase permit. There was some statements earlier with regard to, I believe it was Ms. Martins made the statement, quote, guns in the home don't make you safer. Well, as a matter of studies being cited and opinions being stated, I would like to point that out, that personally, as a firearms owner, I feel I am safer in my home. It's subjective with regard to guns in your home don't make you safer. She also made a statement with regard to the right to live safely every day, worrying that someone will come after you with a gun. Well, as we've heard many testimony with regard to criminals operating with guns, and always the statement of criminals operating with guns, we have not had any statements with regard to legal citizens who have a permit to carry operating in that fashion as committing a crime. We've had a lot of testimony from Professor Olson, specifically regarding HF 240, 6.7. There is some concern with regard to the preponderance of evidence. It'd be nice to know that the due process of law is upheld for citizens who would be succumb to, or would have to succumb to, the preponderance of evidence, some tests included to establish what the preponderance of evidence actually means. And with regard to HF 238 and 239, I specifically remember hearing the statement that Representative Devine mentioned that the provisions within 238 and 239 apply the test of equal status to citizens. Well, I would argue that an individual who succumbed to background checks, training, and licensing to have a permit to carry would be an individual who is no longer in the same class of citizen as an individual who does not have a permit to carry.
Mr. Royce, we need you to wrap up here. We're 4.5 minutes.
I appreciate you taking the time to hear my testimony, and have a nice evening.
Thank you, Mr. Royce, for your testimony. Ma'am?
Hi, good evening. Thank you. My name is Linda Stanton. I'm from Woodbury. I'd just like to address all of the House files that are being considered. Many of these proposals just make it harder for law-abiding people by causing our lives to be more complicated by complying with the laws. Criminals that are considering or committing heinous crimes will be incentivized to work around these new regulations. They will not comply with the law. If criminals are deterred, it would only be to maybe avoid the legal process totally. Regarding HF 238, penalties for bringing a weapon into the school grounds, it seems to me that this just sets up more penalties to be applied after the fact. Suicidal criminals are not worried about this kind of penalty. It only hurts the law-abiding citizens who want to protect themselves, their children, or their relatives. We have a Second Amendment. Please stop regulating it. Let people carry their weapons because this is the best deterrent to suicidal criminals that want to die in infamy. When the national discussion began, people said, let's ask the really difficult questions to stop the violence. I do not see that discussion happening here. To many of us, it's a fact that gun-free zones do not deter these kinds of crimes. But there's no discussion. No talk about how this hurts law-abiding citizens and actually makes us less safe. Is it so hard to admit that gun-free zones are a mistake? Please stop tweaking and regulating so much. Let the Constitution work. Then we'll be a lot better off. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Stanton. Please. Please, everyone, you've been really polite so far. Sir, welcome to the committee.
Hi, my name is Jonathan Norling. Thank you for hearing this. I just wanted to state that I do work at a FFL in the state of Minnesota. And according to this bill of, which one is it? On straw purchases, we do our best to regulate it, but there is no way that we can personally identify if somebody is trying to buy a gun. There are certain signs where we can call it, but there are no 100% ways that we know that that gun is not going to commit a crime. Does that make me a criminal? No. Are there ways that we can better off that? Yes. But I think with the haste of all of this and due to the tragedies that have happened, we need to step back and look further into, yes, okay, this works, this doesn't work, but I feel that we are moving too fast and taking too much haste on all of this. As far as we're looking for reasons to make myself a permit holder, a person who works in a gun store, a criminal. On the other bills that aren't brought up, more reasons to making me and other law-abiding citizens criminals. I think that the problem here and what we should be worrying about is actually stepping back and looking at, are these actual solutions that are going to help our cause? Are these solutions that our forefathers would be proud of us making and putting into effect? Because they fought for this right. They fought against the tyrannies of a government that took away their freedoms. And taking such actions now just puts us back into a tyranny of regulations that, are they really helping us? Is gun control really helping? It's February now. There is already over 300 homicides from criminals in Chicago. No legal gun owner in Chicago has committed a crime. There's been over 300 illegal homicides. Are we going to, by banning anything, stop any criminal from getting their hands on what they're going to want? And I just urge you to take some time and look at what is actually going to work, because we already know by New York, California, Chicago, that these laws do not work. And a lot of these we're just copying and pasting. And I don't see where it's going to change. Being a younger person in the younger generation, I know I'm probably one of the younger people in this room. This is something that I'm going to have to live with the next 40 years. I am 22 years old. I'm not 30, I'm not 40, I'm not kicking the bucket anytime soon. These are laws that are going to affect my future and my children. So if we hastily make decisions, you are corrupting my right of the Second Amendment that was given to me by my forefathers that fought for that right, and I have to live with that. Yeah, we'll get 10 years. We might get a look at it in the future. But is it something that's going to deter us from even trying? On that note, I started a petition that I will be submitting to the committee within the next week or so, saying basically we want things to change. We really do. We want lives to be saved, but we do not want you to make these laws in haste. I finally finished the petition earlier today. In the last 6 hours, I have close to 1,000 signatures. This petition is only in 3 different spots right now, as of right now. And then for the last 2 hours, I have been here. So it just goes to show you how many people want change, but they want you to take your time making sure that the change that we make is the right kind of change. And I urge you to not make these decisions too fast. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Norling, for your testimony. Sir?
Mr.
Chairman. My name is Jeffrey Ahrens. I'm a police officer from the city of Sebeka, Minnesota, though I'm here representing myself, not the views of my department. First, I'd like to address HF 237. Right now, all fire alarms sold by a dealer must go through a background check. All private party sales that are conducted not face-to-face over, they're sent through the mail, whether it's in another state or in the state, must go through an FFL for a background check, generally at a cost to the buyer for utilizing the FFL services of $50 to $100. Only private party transfers within the state that are face-to-face are not required to get a background check currently. And many of those transfers are within families or to someone who is known to the seller. So in reality, right now, there's a relatively small number of guns changing hands that are not going to someone that is either known to the seller to be allowed to purchase a firearm or that do already get a background check. No one wants guns to get into the hands of criminals. And requiring background checks on private party sales on the surface seems like a good idea. However, the buyer and seller will then be at the mercy of the dealer to pay whatever fees is that the dealer decides to impose. Also, requiring background checks on private party transfers would be unenforceable from a law enforcement standpoint without a mandatory registration. There would be no way for me to look at this firearm and say, you went through an FFL to get it transferred to you, or if you were one of the exempt persons from it in the proposed bill. The law-abiding, if this bill is passed, the law-abiding would pay and comply, but those who wish to obtain a gun for illegal reasons would not. We call them criminals because they don't adhere to our laws to begin with. And on top of that, many otherwise law-abiding citizens would probably not comply with the law simply out of spite of it, for feeling that their rights are being violated. All the proposed background check bill would do is add load to the government in the form of manpower and cost in an attempt to enforce it, price self-defense guns out of the reach of some of our poorer citizens, and frankly anger many people by adding a layer of governmental control over property that they already own. All while having very little impact on the people who we do want to stop from getting the firearms. I think a much better option than the proposed bill on the issue would to make the NICS background check system available to the public at little or no cost. I think that people would happily make the call to run a background check on a face-to-face buyer that they don't personally know or think that or have any reason to believe that they might have a problem. And if it costs nothing and doesn't give them the feeling of placing control into government hands, the people would feel like their rights are not being eroded, and I would bet good money that more private party transfers would actually go through background checks than if the proposed bill were to be passed. One other bill I'd like to address quick is HF 184. I do believe that it had, the proposed bill has good goals, but as was pointed out here earlier, it was suffering from poor implementation. Police already have their budget strained. Many law enforcement agencies are operating deputies and officers down in the field. They can't pay to put men on the street. They're not equipped to handle the public bringing their firearms in and storing them. And frankly, law enforcement has kind of a poor reputation of guns that they have confiscated or taken as evidence of maintaining those arms and getting them back to the rightful owners in good condition. Many law enforcement, the armories at law enforcement agencies are set up for arms that are being used every day. For storage of firearms, there's a much different method to maintaining them properly without damage.
Mr. Ahrens, you need to wrap up. We're 4.5 minutes now.
I'm sorry, sir.
That's okay. But
I'm very close to done. I think a better option to the bill would be a grant program for either rifle ranges or gun stores. They're already equipped to handle firearms. They're already trained in dealing with storage and handling of the firearms and the ammunition. There'd be no loss of rights for the people that are voluntarily turning in their arms, and it would completely eliminate the problems that were cited about data practices and such. Then if the person did decide that they wanted to not retrieve their firearms at some point and become a non-firearm owner, they're already at the store, they can be placed on consignment, and they're equipped for sale.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Aaron's. Sir?
Mr. Chairman?
Welcome to the committee.
My name is Brett Bowney. I'm from Marshall. Now, I'm not going to bore you with rhetoric, and I'm not going to bombard you with numbers or statistics. Instead,
Can I just ask you to, is it Bounty?
Bowney, B-A-U-N-E.
Thank you.
Anyway, but instead, I have a simple, fundamental question for you, as a whole. These bills that are being discussed, what are the constitutionality of them? And there's 6 years ago, I enlisted in the Navy, and I stood up to defend the rights that were inherent from the Constitution. What I did not realize is that when I came home, these rights, they were actually privileges. We have many infringements on the rights that are granted to us that are already infringed. Now, whether these bills are accepted or moral or not, the fact of the matter is they're still infringing. And my question to you is, what do you feel about the constitutionality of the matter?
Sir, we're not going to engage in debate about we're offering some time for you to testify. If you want to make a statement about the Second Amendment, you're free to do that, or your opposition to any of these bills. We'll have plenty of time. The committee will debate these. So for the interest of time, we're just going to...
Very well then.
Thank you.
No, Ms. Martins, her closing statement, she said that we had a lot of rights. Now, there are already a lot of infringements beyond what is being discussed today. I mean, these rights are no longer here. I mean, these rights are privileges. I mean, there is no longer liberty. It is now tyranny. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for your testimony, Mr. Bonnie. I probably pronounced your name wrong. Sir? No, I was just... Thank you.
Hello, thank you for allowing me to testify.
Welcome to the committee.
Roger Paris is my name, from St. Peter. I wanted to speak because I'm having a really hard time wrapping my mind around why these laws are even created for Minnesota. We don't have a large gun problem, as Andrew had said. We had hardly any murders last year, as opposed in comparison to Chicago or Illinois. And even in the years before that, we were very low. So that's, overall, I'm having a hard time wrapping my mind around having these bills at all. 240, that has me concerned because it seems very subjective and not objective in its intent. It puts rights in the hands of police and sheriffs, and that shouldn't be their role. It gave me the feeling that we're guilty before we're proven innocent with that bill. 237, my concern there was the elimination of judicial determination. It seems like that circumvents our judicial process. I have a number of other items there, but in the interest of time, I've submitted this already in all of my writings. 238 and 239, I like what Mr. Cornish had said about working to make that bill where we allow notification in the schools. To me, that seems very logical, just like we have here. All of you have been around firearms all day today, in the hundreds, and not a single incident. So I like Mr. Cornish's ideas. 239, my big concern there was the penalty shifts from a petty to a gross misdemeanor, which is, a much stiffer penalty. And also the second offense, I believe it says that it's a felony for your second offense, which to me that goes overboard. So that is what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee. I appreciate the opportunity to talk. I'm going to try not, my name's John Mulford, by the way. I plan on being back tomorrow. I'll explain a little more about who I am and my background at that time, so I can cut down on tonight's comments. I just have a question about Bill 237. I didn't have a chance to be here this morning. It has Section 8, Subdivision 10, showing that transfer report not required. What I'm wondering is, it seems to imply a later section, Section 14, Subdivision 7A. The reason I'm asking this is since I wasn't here this morning, the transfer by or to licensed dealers only. Now, my question is, before I make any comments, is does that imply that that earlier section and subdivision are superseded or, you know, in subservience to this later section? In other words, will all transactions, if this bill passes, be required, I mean, private sales and so on, be required to go through a licensed dealer?
Sir, if you want to put your question in writing, we'll make sure that we get a response to you, but we're going to, I can't, we have people standing behind you, and if we debate all the bills.
With all due respect, Representative Haymeyer, the reason I'm asking that is because the answer is contingent, my answer or my response to what I want to say is contingent upon understanding correctly. I'm assuming that the bill does require universal background check, is that correct? And my cursory view of the bill doesn't seem to show a mechanism for enforcing that, so I'm wondering, is this going to lead to a registration list or a registration database?
Sir, I'm really not going to debate the issue. I mean, we had the debate.
Debating, it's a question.
Okay, I'm not going to respond. I don't believe that it will, and I really do not want to. Otherwise, we're going to be here all night, because a lot of people have problems with a lot of these bills, and we're going to start to lose members.
Well, the reason gun owners have problems with them, Representative Haymeyer, is that in several cases already, registration in our country, despite the second, has led to confiscation. For example, I'm going to give you two examples here. The SKSs out in California that were okay until they had the registration list, and then they seized them. And then also in 1991 and 1992, Mayor Dinkins first had the registration list and then used that list to confiscate the firearms. What we're concerned about is that our most fundamental, I was very disturbed by Ms. Merton when she said that we have the human right to feel safe. The human right that is most important of all is the right to protect your life and your loved one's life. All other human rights are contingent upon that right. And when that right is violated, I've never heard of two corpses arguing over the right to freedom of speech or freedom of religion. So that's why.
Sir, when you're done with your testimony, Mr. Cleary, who's our gun expert over there, can answer your questions. Thank you very much for your testimony. We'll see you tomorrow. Please step.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for this opportunity to speak.
Welcome to the committee.
My name is Mike Goots, and I'm a retired law enforcement, federal, military police, and special agent with the U.S. Army Criminal Investigation Command. I say that because in the course of my career, I have more than one time had to deal with processing a crime scene, whereas a person was unable to defend themselves. I truly believe that there needs to be a cultural perception and change in the state. Restricting gun laws for law-abiding citizens, I don't believe is wise. Particularly, I'm referring to House Bill 238 as well as House Bill 237, Sections 7 and 8. I don't believe that restricting law-abiding citizens is already an issue. I think we're, by definition of law-abiding citizens, we're doing fine as we are. I believe that there is a tension between security and freedom, and it's very acute at the time that we live now. I believe many of the moral controls that we now have are fewer, perhaps, in generations before, as a result of broken families, gangs, lack of a genuine relationship with Christ, and by the way, that is not a religious statement. And also, we are now aware of more incidences involving improper use of firearms. Yes, in this climate of fear, we do really need to be afraid of armed law-abiding citizens who openly carry legally in Minnesota or own particular firearms, such as an AK-47 for collection, recreational use? I don't think so. Just because the criminals use them doesn't mean we're criminals. Please don't put us in that same boat. And so that's my concern. And so what I would like to say is, in finishing up, please do not enact any laws that would have any unintended consequences of putting victims at risk or trampling on the freedoms of law-abiding Minnesotans. We should not be burdened or prejudiced, and this includes people groups throughout Minnesota, in regards to putting all of them in the same boat as criminals just because they belong to a particular group. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the time.
Thank you for your testimony. All right, welcome to the committee. Could you state your name for the record, please?
Hi, my name is Connor Dane, D-A-I-N-E. I would like to first state, forgive my ragged appearance. I didn't intend on speaking today, but I thought that I should speak up rather than stay quiet. I'm a 19-year-old gun owner. All of my firearms have been purchased legally. All of my firearms are secured at home to the maximum extent that I can secure them. A person who would wish to steal my firearms from me would have to break down my front door, go into my house, find my safe, which is hidden, and rip it out of the concrete foundation of my house. Then pry it open and get all the gun locks off of each one of my guns. I would like to state that HF 244 scares persons who, like myself, have taken every responsible action to prevent their firearms from being stolen, and it scares them from reporting it. I'll later make comment on straw purchases, but I keep full personal records of every one of my firearms in a file locked separately away from my safe. I have basically coroner toe tags with serial numbers attached to photographs with spent shell casings from those weapons in a file in my house, so that I may assist in any form possible the police if these firearms were ever stolen. I do not need the government to tell me how to responsibly keep my firearms, because with these firearms that I own comes a standard of responsibility. And that, as I would like to speak for the majority of the people behind me who own guns, they agree with me. I would be scared to report the theft of a firearm because there is a chance that I may be prosecuted and not able to possess firearms any longer. With that being said, I would like to move on to the straw purchase aspect of these bills, in that I have followed every step as required by law and even exceeded it with the purchasing of my firearms. Every firearm that I have has come from an FFL. I have not sold any firearms in private sales. However, a few weeks ago, I was asked by one of my friends if I was willing to sell my AR-15 to him. The AR-15 I purchased with my permit to purchase that I got from the Oakdale Police Department. I went through, all checks, submitted all information, were several phone calls with the police department working this out. My friend asked, would you sell that to me? And he gave me a fair price offer. I said yes, I trust you, you've gone shooting with me before, but as a responsible gun owner, and this is not law, I asked this of him separately, as a responsible gun owner, I would ask that you go and fill out the same permit to purchase that I filled out. And even though I'm fully able to, sell you a gun, even if it was a simple hunting shotgun, I would still like to see this as a guarantee of some sort of due process taken to make sure that you are not a criminal. With that being said, I feel that some of these laws tend to put gun owners on edge. They tend to make them want to question their moral obligation to follow them. And I've been asked by several of my friends, well, what happens to these laws when they're met with massive noncompliance? If you enact these bills to further restrict responsible gun owners, and I will wrap this up, I am sorry. If you enact these bills to restrict responsible gun owners like myself, and I'm not saying that I would not comply with the law, but there are some that will not. What is your response to that? You know, if you have any. You know, there are punishments in place, but are you making these gun owners criminals in their own right because they do not feel they need to follow these laws to be responsible? If you have any questions for me.
Thank you for your testimony, Mr. Dane.
All right. Thank you very much.
I'm Jim Orvis. I'm from the city of St. Paul. I work on photo shoots as my day job. I was in Eastern Europe when the coup happened that ousted Gorbachev. I saw some serious street violence. My
Excuse me, Mr. Orvis, could you talk into the microphone?
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry, what was your name? Could you restate your
James
name for the record?
Orvis, O-R-V-I-S.
Thank you.
I was in the coup on the ground when that happened in Russia. My wife was in the coup where Aristide was outed. And when you've seen horrific street violence close up, it does something to your spirit. I hate murder. I hate thuggery. I believe it was Miss Martin is talking about how big this problem is. Let us help. Please, let legal owners help. Police are burdened too much. I feel for them. They have way too much on their plate. But if a criminal has a reasonable deterrent because he thinks maybe that guy might have something right here, that might stop it. When people do crimes, they go, why do they beat up on little old ladies? Because they know they can pound the crap out of her. They don't pick on guys my size. Let us be free, the free, silent, legal deterrent to crime. So we don't have to see those kind of things in our country. We should not have to see Sandy Hook. That's all I got. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Orvis. Welcome to the committee. Could you state your name for the record, please?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. My name is Dylan Apple. I'm from Southwest Minnesota. I traveled a pretty good distance to be here today. Unfortunately, I won't be able to make it to the next two hearings. So I'd like to speak against the entire list of proposed bills as they are. I really think that we're questioning something much bigger than anyone in this room with the proposed legislation. The right to keep and bear arms and the entire Bill of Rights, for that matter, is a basic human right that is instilled upon birth, and they can't be removed. I encourage each and every one of you here today, including the audience, to do everything within your power to stop this kind of legislation. And I, for one, will be the first to say that if these bills are passed as stated, I will no longer be a resident of Minnesota. Thanks.
Thank you for your testimony. Welcome to the committee. Could you state your name for the record, please?
Thank you for your time, Mr. Chairman. My name is Robert Malechek, M-A-L-E-C-E-K. I think that the biggest disconnect I have with this discussion is that statistically, this is one of the safest times to be an American. We don't even have a statistical increase in mass shootings. All we have is an increase in media coverage. And I question folks who want to hurry up and do something before we've had the opportunity to think about it. And I would hope that the representatives present would take the time to consider, that would take the time to make sure that they don't act in haste and that they don't punish the law-abiding in ineffective criminal control measures to solve a problem that is on the decline anyways. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your testimony. Is there anybody else who would like to testify to this? No? Seeing none, this committee is adjourned.